in order to properly use a knife to protect ourselves or those around us, we first need to understand what knife fighting is and what it is not. Now, knife fighting is a use of a knife to protect yourself. A knife is a very close quarters weapon. It's something that's very up close and personal, which means you're going to need to be okay with getting bloody, with being in a grappling fight, being very close and personal with that assailant. Now, I say be okay. Sometimes, if we can avoid a knife fight, we're always going to avoid a knife fight because they're dirty and there's a huge possibility that you actually will get cut. But you need to understand that before you start carrying a knife for self-defense, otherwise you're going to be in for a nasty surprise and you're never going to be effective with one of these. You know, it's not like a gun. It's not like you can put some distance between yourself before shooting. This is something that is very close, very personal. Now, you can throw this at a max of maybe 5 yards, but generally speaking, 3 yards and inside is where we're fighting with these knives. And they're a very dirty weapon, you know, but they can be very effective. So the question would become, why? Why use a knife instead of a gun or pepper spray or stun gun? Okay, why, or a collapsible baton or something like that? Well, there's a couple reasons. First of all, you may be like me. Maybe you're underage, you can't carry a gun, but you still want to be protecting your family, protecting yourself, all that stuff, so you wanted a weapon to do that with, and the knife happened to be all you got, you know? So when it's all you got, hey, it's the best weapon you have. Or maybe you live in a state where it's not practical to get a gun license. It's too complicated. They make it basically impossible. Technically you have the right, but you know, it's just not possible. So, or maybe you live in a non-permissive country outside of the United States, and maybe a knife is legal, you know? Then again, maybe you carry a gun, but when it comes to close quarters combat, a gun is not your ideal weapon. A knife is. If I'm up close, like so many fights go, so many actual street fights go up really close, really dirty, I want a knife. So I want to know how to use a knife as at least a backup weapon, if not a primary weapon. And you know, you're going to be the one who decides, why do I want to carry a knife? Those are just some simple ideas, some why behind carrying a knife. But the next question would be, where can you use a knife, okay? And what kind of a situation would a knife actually be applicable? I mean, think about it. When you put a gun on, basically you're prepared for pretty much any kind of a situation. It's not ideal for close quarters combat, but it could technically be used for that. And if you're good, you know, if you're good with it, you could reach out to 50, 100 yards with that gun, stop an active shooter. You know, with this knife, you know, it's right up close. So basically, it's not going to be applicable really in trying to stop someone out at 100 yards. It's definitely an up-close kind of weapon, but there is a few places where this really shines. Like I already briefly mentioned, close quarters combat, that's definitely where this thing shines. When someone comes at you with a weapon and you aren't able to have a gun, again, this thing really shines. I mean, even further, say that someone was coming at you and there was a disparity of force. Maybe they don't have a weapon, but they're much bigger and stronger than you, and you know your basic strikes, but these guys just know their basic strikes and are just, you know, knocking the snot out of you. You're going to want something to equalize that, and maybe a gun wouldn't be a wise thing to draw at that moment because it might get taken from you. Whereas with this knife, if somebody tries to grab my wrist, I can bring it around and slash their wrist. It's much harder to take a knife from someone's hand than actually to take a gun. And then, further imagine you were up against someone who was more skilled than you, someone who knew Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or some kind of wrestling or basically, you know, those ground fighting skills, and they got you on the ground, they're stretching you out, and you feel your back snapping and everything's popping, and you need something to get out of there. There comes a point, you know, when you're in a ground fight when you're too locked out to just get out of it. You're doomed unless you have this knife. And you can just pull this knife out and start poking at some extra holes in him. So you see, there's a lot of actually really legitimate reasons to know knife fighting. And, you know, it's just something that you're going to have to figure out for you. So we have the why and the where, but what about the when? Now, a knife must not be mistaken for anything other than deadly force. Just because it's not a gun does not mean it's not deadly force. This is deadly force. No matter where you cut somebody, they have the potential of bleeding out. There's a common misconception on, you know, books, movies, everything, where if you cut someone's arm, they'll be okay, they'll bleed a lot, but they'll be okay. Here's the thing, you can bleed to death in 3 minutes from a simple cut of one of your large arteries in your arm. And, you know, it's very much lethal force. You know, if you don't, I mean, when you think about it, typical response time for an ambulance is at least 15 minutes. So, this is definitely lethal force. So as such, lethal force should only be used when there is an imminent threat to us, to our lives, or of great bodily injury to us or those around us. So basically, you are justified in most cases in using deadly force only when you have a direct threat to your life. So basically, this is your last resort. And people call knives last-ditch solutions. The truth is, guns are also last-ditch solutions. Every kind of weapon is a last-ditch solution. Once you pull lethal force, it's a last-ditch solution. And, overall, they're not perfect, but knives make a pretty good last-ditch solution. So we've gone over the why, the where, and the when. Now we need to understand the how. And the good news is that we've got the basic knife skills for the Protector series coming out. This is the first video in it. And we're going to be going over all kinds of stuff from where to target with your knife, how to, basic knife manipulations, how to keep that knife in your hand while you're transitioning from one position to another. We're going to be talking about blocking, about close quarters combat, and just all kinds of great stuff with knives. And, it's stuff that I've learned through first-hand experience in force-on-force training, in butchering, in learning from various professionals as I could. I took a lump sum of wonderful information and made it into my own fighting system. It's not my own stuff. I borrowed it all, but I just put it here and organized it. So hopefully maybe you'll get some good stuff out of it. Obviously, you're going to need to make your own fighting system. No matter what it is, it's got to be made and tailored specifically for you, but maybe this will give you a little bit of inspiration.